Hello, this is Mr. McMurray, and we are here talking about epithelium again. Wow, how exciting. I know we all like to talk about epithelial. All right, so here we go. This is what your next flow chart will look like, so you can kind of plan that. This is definitely going to be, I would turn your page sideways and do a whole page on this one, but that's up to you. All right, far be it from me to tell you how to live your life, right? All right, so, but it's going to have a fair number of categories. All right, now, so first thing is we're going to talk about the functions of different epithelial tissues. Okay, what are their functions? What do they do? All right, and so based on their function, we're going to base on the type they are. Okay, and the first type we're going to do is cuboidal. If you remember, cuboidal means that it looks cube-shaped, somewhat like that. Okay, let me see if we have a picture of some cuboidal cells here. All right, so here we go again. Had to pause there for a second. Let me get my thoughts together here. All right, so cuboidal, you can see we're talking about simple cuboidal. So they are, as you can see there, they've got a simple cuboidal line. There's one line, so it's simple, simple cuboidal tissue, and you can tell they're about the same height as they are width, and that's why they are. You look in here, you notice they're not all nice and neat. They're a little more blobby shapes, but once again, you can still see that they're about as wide as they are tall. So these would all be cuboidal cells. All right. All right. Now, what about cuboidal? Where do you find them? Well, first of all, they're fairly rare. You don't find a lot of cuboidal. They're not the most common kind, but these particular are found lining the ducts of glands. So if you have glands, things like your sweat glands, things like this, they would line the little opening or duct that goes up to the surface. Okay, and so that is where you would find cuboidal tissue. All right, for the next one, we're going to talk about simple squamous epithelial. All right, or epithelium. All right, so I just put epi, but that's actually epithelium tissue or epithelium. Simple tells us there's how many rows? Just one. Squamous tells us they are flattened. All right. Now, where would you find these? Well, for example, the linings in the lungs would be one place. Okay, air comes into these sacs. There's little blood vessels that run through these cells, and oxygen can jump into the cell. Carbon dioxide can jump out of the cells, and that is how. So they're single layer, and you can see that they're fairly flattened. So that's simple squamous. All right. So now we kind of looked at simple squamous. Let's talk about what it does. All right, simple squamous forms serous membranes, all right, or the serosa, if you remember that. Simple squamous serosa. And where do you find those? Basically, they either line the inside of the body cavities or the outside of organs, okay? And so if you looked on the outside of an organ, touch the lungs, the heart, or whatever, you'd be touching the simple squamous. It's a very simple layer around it, relatively thin. Okay, there's also inside the body cavity, we talked about the other day, there'd be lining there. All right, so that would be simple squamous. Now, let's see what else we have. Up here we have stratified squamous epithelial. Don't ask me why these aren't fitting the little boxes. I'm doing on a new computer, and I think it just doesn't like it very good. But anyhow, stratified tells us same as this, except for now we have different layers. So there are multiple layers of the squamous tissue. So we're still going to flatten, but there are going to be a lot more of them. Oops. Hang on. All right, epithelial is going to be these are going to be in high wear areas, okay? For example, your skin, obviously, so it flake off, so that's why you're going to have to have multiple layers. Now, inside your organs in here, and the inside of the body cavities and the outside organs, they may jostle around a little bit when you move and stuff, but for the most part, there's not a lot of wear and tear. So you can get by with just a single layer. Over here, you're going to need more layers because you're going to wear off layers constantly. Your skin is constantly flaking off and stuff. Your mouth is going to have food and everything working in there. Your esophagus is going to have food sliding down it all the time. And so they need a little bit, they're going to have a lot more wear and tear, and so they are going to be stratified squamous, okay? And this is an example of a picture of it, and here's an actual picture of some skin cells, okay? But you can see that most of these are flattened. They're definitely a lot wider than they are tall. Some of the bottom ones are a little bit taller. You notice in here, some of these bottom ones don't quite really look squamous yet, but as you get them up here, they definitely get flattened and flattened and flattened. But anyhow, that is stratified squamous, such as in your skin, mouth, and esophagus. All right, columnar epithelial, we know what they're going to look like. They're going to be tall and skinny. All right. They're going to be tall and skinny cells, okay? And that would be all these right here. You can see them all packed in there, okay? And see here, these are called goblet cells, okay? Now, why? Because they have like a stem down here that attaches them, then they come out and have this round, looks like a goblet or a wine glass, where you have the glass up here, a stem coming down, and a base at the bottom. All right, so these are called goblet cells, and we'll talk about those here in a minute, but that's just an example of what these might look like. So you can see how they're definitely long and skinny, okay? Taller than they are wide. All right, now, where would you find columnar? Well, these are your mucosa membranes, okay? These line all the surfaces that are exposed to air, okay? And that is why they're going to have those goblet cells. We talk about those goblet cells. Those are the things that make the mucus or whatever they're secreting out. And so that's sometimes you'll see the goblet cells, all right? And they produce the mucus. One, the mucus helps protect the surface, keep it from drying out. It also helps things to move smoothly through, so like your intestines and stuff like that. If they didn't have that mucus, then it might be harder to push the food through there. It might do more damage to your lining of your intestines and stuff like that. So the mucus helps to kind of lubricate it or slide it along. All right, now the next one is transitional epithelial. If you're in transition, it means you're changing, okay? And transitional epithelial is changing, okay? It can look like this, which is, notice that these are pretty round and flatted, more no, almost cuboidal. These are a little columnar, but they're almost more like that. Let me see if I have what they transition to. No, I do not. Okay, I was afraid of that, but anyhow. But if they get stretched, for example, this is in your bladder. As your bladder fills up, this gets stretched this way, and it flattens the cell out. So they change from more cuboidal looking to more squamosal looking. And so that's called transitional epithelium because it changes as it stretches, okay? And so it changes shape or transitions from one shape to another as it gets put more pressure on, all right? And so this is very stretchy tissue that can change shape. All right, and mostly found in the urinary system because it's going to stretch and get bigger. And as it does that, it's going to send has little stretch receptors in there. They're sending messages to you, say, hey, you got to go. It's time to go. We got to go. I got to go to the restroom. And so you raise your hand and say, Mr. McMurray, I need to go to the restroom because my transitional epithelial has become squamosal. All right, I heard of an anatomy teacher made her students say that, but I don't know that I'll do that. But here's the deal. If your transitional epithelium has become squamosal, that means it's all stretched out and it's very thin, and that means if it's stretched out, your bladder's full and it's time to go to the restroom. All right, next one is called glandular epithelial, and this has to do, guess what, with glands. All right, and so these are things that secrete stuff. They make sweat, or they make oil, or they make hormones that are going to be secreted out of the cell. All right. Now, there are two types of glandular epithelial. All right. And the first type is endocrine. We recognize that from the endocrine system. Okay, so glands that are in the endocrine system are going to have this kind of tissue. All right, and so this would be your epithelial cells down here at the bottom. I would recommend you draw a picture of this, pause it if you need to. But these are the glandular epithelium. They are the ones that actually secrete, let's just say this is a sweat gland, they would actually secrete the sweat. Now, once it's secreted, it goes through this duct or opening up to the surface. Notice the cuboidal cells we talked about before that are lining the duct, right here and right here, okay? So the cuboidal line the duct, and the sweat or oil just goes out, okay? This could be in your pancreas where it's making insulin, or it's making glucagon, which is a chemical that does the opposite of insulin. Insulin tells your body to take sugar out of the blood. Glucagon says, hey, let's release it and put it back in your blood because your blood sugar is too low. So they're doing that. But anyhow, it would be this kind of epithelial cells, and the glandular ones down here at the bottom actually make the substance. The cuboidal line the duct as it goes up to the surface. All right, and that's endocrine. All right, or okay, my bad. I have the wrong picture hooked up. Okay, let me try to correct this now. I don't want to have to go back and redo the whole thing. So let me see where my pin there is. Okay, all right. I apologize. This picture should come up first. Okay, this is your endocrine because it goes into the blood. Okay, my bad. Totally was didn't seem quite right. Okay, so these are all your glandular epithelial that's secreting the hormone, either insulin, glucagon, whatever. Okay, it gets dumped directly into the blood, and then the blood carries it wherever it needs to go. In this case, there are no ducts, okay, because it's not opening up to the surface or anything. It's just going directly into the blood. So the blood vessels run all around these cells, so that as they secrete it, they just put it directly in there, okay? And these are various hormones usually that are used different parts of the body. So they have to get in the blood and be carried off to where they need to go. Now, the gland we looked at earlier, and I was saying sweat and oil glands, is exocrine, which means it's going to go out of the tissue onto the surface. Okay, now that surface might be inside the pancreas, like we talked about just a minute ago, and those would be pancreatic juices. The pancreas makes juices that basically do all the digesting of our food, and so the pancreas excretes that out, and then it goes over to your small intestine where it actually digests your food. Now, on your surface of your body, you would have sweat glands, which would take oil and sweat and stuff like that out, sebaceous glands. All right, so this would be an exocrine gland. And I'm sorry, exocrine gland would have the cuboidals up here. It would have the glandular epithelium at the bottom, and the stuff would go out your sweat gland or your oil gland or whatever, and it would come out to the surface. Okay, sorry about that. So this is endocrine over here, no ducts. And over here, where we have ducts, quack, quack, all that, because we have ducts. And so it is going to carry stuff out to the surface. And so that's why it's an exocrine gland, and this one is an endocrine gland. All right, I was thinking exocrine came first, so I apologize. I have my pictures messed up. All right, but here we go. And that's basically all the different epithelial tissue that you need to know about. All right. Oh, sorry, last thing. So the sweat glands would be here, oil glands would work. The pancreas, not the insulin and the glucagon, that's an endocrine function, so that goes directly into the blood. But the pancreatic juices and stuff that flow from there down into the small intestine, your liver can also excrete things out of it, and so forth. So that will be all of those kind of tissues. And I believe we're going to stop right there. Yep, because the next one's going to be going into connective tissue and stuff like that. All right, yep, and we don't want to get into that. So that we'll save that for next time. We'll do all the exciting stuff all at one time. So we'll save that. But this will be all the material that you will need for your That Should Cover It quiz, which will be tomorrow, and it will be over all these epithelial notes. Could also be over those 4 types of tissues, but basically all these flowchart notes. All right. In the meantime, have a good time, study those, and be ready tomorrow for the quiz.